The neutral trade station hung in orbit above Kezar 4 like a colossal lantern, its silvered panels glinting under the sun's pale light. Thousands of travelers came and went daily, diplomats, merchants and smugglers alike, believing the station's reputation for peace would shelter them from the chaos of the galaxy. That illusion shattered in the space of a heartbeat. The Shydrek claw struck without warning. Dozens of armored raiders flooded docking bays and corridors, their reptilian forms moving with a predatory efficiency that froze civilians in place. Their leader broadcast across the station, his guttural voice booming from every speaker. "We are the Claw. The weak will kneel or the weak will die. The galaxy will learn our sovereignty and our tribute will be paid." Within minutes, more than 400 alien delegates found themselves herded into the Central Assembly Hall, stripped of weapons, their frightened whispers echoing under the vaulted dome. The Claw patrolled with pulse rifles slung low, their fanged mouths curled in mocking grins as they surveyed their terrified hostages. Nearby, aboard the United Earth Navy frigate Resolute, Captain Elias Ward studied the emergency transmission with an expression carved from stone. His dark eyes tracked the terrorists' movements as if memorizing each flaw in their posture. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, the silver streaks in his close-cropped hair the only concession to age. A scar bisected his jaw, the relic of an old war that he never bothered to hide. He had seen too many crises begin this way, and he already knew how they ended when weakness guided the response. Beside him stood Sergeant Cole Maddox, armored and impatient, the kind of soldier who lived for clarity in combat. Maddox had the air of a wolf leashed too tightly, his voice low, carrying the steady growl of someone who believed hesitation cost lives. "They've already executed 2 civilians, Captain. They're going to start using bodies to make their point. You know how this goes." Ward didn't answer immediately. He shifted his gaze to the third man in the room, Lieutenant Marcus Hale, who sat at a console surrounded by glowing data streams. Hale's fingers flew across the controls, eyes flicking between code and signal analysis. He was younger, sharper in tongue than in build, but behind his sardonic veneer lived a mind built for dissecting enemy systems. Without looking up, he muttered, "They're running a jamming net strong enough to choke station comms, but their broadcast lines are sloppy. Amateurish if you ask me. I could piggyback into their chatter inside of 10 minutes. Ward folded his arms. "Do it. I want to hear what they're saying when they think no one's listening." The 3 men fell into silence except for the hiss of data streaming through Hale's station. The images continued to roll across the main screen, the alien delegates on their knees, the terrorists pacing with weapons ready. One of the Claws shoved a trembling ambassador to the floor, its clawed foot pressing against the envoy's throat. Ward exhaled through his nose, his jaw tightening until it seemed carved from iron. Moments later, Hale's voice broke the silence. "I'm in. Translating their chatter now." His tone shifted as the words came through his earpiece. "They think we're going to beg. They're laughing about it, saying humans always fold like everyone else. Just a matter of time before we sit down at the table." Maddox spat a curse under his breath. "They don't know who they're dealing with." Ward finally spoke, his tone calm, almost unnervingly so. "Of course they don't. Terrorists always believe fear is universal. They've never fought a species that learned to live with it." He turned from the screen and faced his men, voice firm. "We don't negotiate with terrorists. Not now, not ever." The statement seemed to hang in the air, stark and uncompromising. Maddox's lips curled into a fierce grin, as though reassured that the line had been drawn. Hale arched an eyebrow, his usual cynicism masking something more complex. "Captain, the council delegates are already screaming for talks. The whole station's filled with species who think negotiation is survival. They're not going to thank us if we start painting the walls with Shydrek blood." Ward's eyes were unblinking. "They'll thank us when they're alive. Or they won't. Either way it doesn't matter. What matters is that the Claw never believed this strategy works." Across the galaxy, envoys were already convening, frantically discussing appeasement. The station's alien council transmitted pleas directly to the Resolute, urging humanity to open dialogue before more innocents were killed. Their voices wavered between fear and outrage. A scaled envoy from the Varen collective hissed through the comms, "You must speak with them, Captain Ward. The Claw are ruthless. Defy them and the deaths will multiply. You humans will doom us all." Ward listened in silence, then cut the channel without response. Hale smirked bitterly. "Not making friends today, sir?" Ward's gaze flicked back to the hostages on screen. "We're not here to make friends. We're here to end a threat." Another broadcast erupted across the station, a Shydrek warrior dragging an alien hostage before the camera. The victim pleaded in their native tongue, voice shrill with terror. Without hesitation, the terrorist fired a round into the hostage's chest, blood pooling across the floor as their body fell limp. Gasps and screams rippled through the assembly hall. The leader's voice bellowed once more, "This is what happens to those who deny us. You have one cycle to obey." Maddox's hands clenched into fists. That's it. They just signed their death warrant. Ward's expression never changed, but the scar on his jaw seemed to deepen with the tension in his face. "Prepare the squad. Sergeant, you'll lead breach teams into the station's lower sectors. Lieutenant, strip their jammers, make their broadcasts work for us. I want the galaxy to see what happens when terrorists test humanity." The Resolute shifted position in orbit, its gun batteries turning with mechanical precision until they faced the trade station like a predator coiling before a strike. For now, the weapons stayed silent, but the message was unmistakable. Inside the frigate, men checked their gear with the quiet discipline of professionals who understood the weight of what came next. Maddox moved among them, slapping shoulders, murmuring reminders of kill zones and breaching tactics. Hale muttered about data nodes and firewalls, though beneath his sarcasm was the unmistakable edge of anticipation. Ward stood apart, arms folded, surveying his men with the gravity of a commander who had chosen a path from which there was no return. On the main display, the Shydrek laughed as they paraded their captives. They had no idea that their hourglass had already been turned upside down, its sand running fast toward the end. Ward's voice carried across the prep bay, steady and final. "Gentlemen, the Council wants us to negotiate. The Claw expect us to kneel. They're wrong on both counts. We don't kneel and we don't bargain with killers. Tonight, we remind the galaxy why humanity survives." The engines of the Resolute thrummed to life, echoing like the heartbeat of a predator closing in. In the quiet before the storm, Maddox grinned savagely and Hale muttered a dry curse, but Ward only watched the stars, his eyes as cold and unyielding as the vacuum beyond. And then the frigate slipped closer to the station, its shadow falling across the docking bays like the warning of a blade. The station's council chamber reeked of fear. Delegates pressed together in half-circle rows, their voices overlapping in a chorus of panic. Tall insectoids clattered their mandibles in distress, aquatic envoys bubbled from tanks with frantic tones, and the furred diplomats of the Saren wailed that surrender was the only path to survival. Holographic projections of human officers flickered before them, Captain Elias Ward standing in grim contrast to the hysteria. He waited as the shouting died down, his expression never shifting from the unyielding mask that had already begun to unnerve them. "You will not open negotiations," Ward said, his voice firm, carrying across the chamber as if he were standing among them. "The United Earth Navy will not permit it." Gasps and outrage rippled through the delegates. One reptilian envoy hissed, scales flashing pale green. "You're condemning us. The Claw cannot be resisted. They've shattered fleets, butchered colonies. What chance do you have, human?" Ward met their eyes without flinching. "We've faced worse than the Shydrek Claw. And we learned long ago what happens when you reward terror. The moment you bow, you ensure every hostage-taker who follows will demand more blood." A heavy silence fell, the council stunned by the bluntness. To them, compromise was survival. To Ward, compromise was a death sentence postponed. When the transmission ended, Sergeant Cole Maddox let out a bark of humorless laughter inside the Resolute's tactical bay. "They're terrified, Captain. Can't see beyond their own throats. Typical." He checked the magazine of his rifle with practiced precision, the metallic click punctuating his disdain. "They'd rather hand over entire star systems than risk a firefight. Makes me sick." Ward gave no answer. He leaned over the tactical display, studying blueprints of the station Hale had projected. His eyes traced entry points, chokeholds, possible ambush sites. Each flick of his gaze carved another line into his mental map of the coming assault. Lieutenant Marcus Hale lounged at his console, though his restless fingers betrayed him. He tapped data streams into place with sharp keystrokes. "I almost envy the Claw. Imagine the arrogance it takes to think humans are going to sit at a table and haggle over ransom money. They honestly believe we'll play nice. Guess we have a reputation to correct." Ward's jaw flexed. "We're not correcting. We're establishing." He pointed at the display, tracing a corridor. "Maddox, your squad breaches here. This service shaft leads to the hostages' chamber." The Claw positioned their strongest guards in the central hall, but they left the flank thin. "We exploit that." Maddox leaned in, eyes scanning the diagram with the hunger of a predator eyeing its prey. "Close quarters work. Good. Less chance of civilians catching stray fire." He smirked, though his tone stayed cold. And more chance to show the bastards what real soldiers look like. Hale raised a brow, sarcasm dripping. You'll get your chance to play hero, Sergeant. Meanwhile, I'll be down in the guts of their jamming field, gutting their comms from the inside out. They want the galaxy to watch their little terror show? Fine. Let's give the galaxy front row seats to their humiliation. Ward nodded once. Do it. Every execution they commit goes out live. Every hostage they threaten, every word they scream. Then the feed shifts and everyone sees what happens when humans step in. Maddox slapped his rifle shut with finality. The warning won't just be for the Claw. Every would-be terrorist in this galaxy will think twice. The preparation stretched into hours, but tension kept the men sharp. Ward observed his squad, men chosen for their steadiness under fire. They worked in silence, checking weapons, adjusting armor seals, rehearsing gestures with one another that spoke more clearly than words. They had fought together before, and it showed in the economy of their movements. No speeches, no bravado, only readiness. Maddox prowled the room like a caged animal, occasionally breaking the quiet with short reminders. 2 shots, not 3. Don't spray, place. Civilians first, hostiles second. Anyone hesitates, you shove them behind you. His tone carried weight because no one doubted he would do exactly that. Across the room, Hale's voice cut through the stillness, tinged with dry amusement. You know, if this were any other species, we'd be filling the air with treaties and bargaining chips. But us? We're turning their comms into a free broadcast channel for war crimes in progress. History professors are going to love this one. Ward glanced at him. History will call it necessary. The silence that followed was thick. Even Hale, cynicism intact, did not push further. He understood what Maddox knew instinctively. Ward carried the weight of every decision like iron on his back. If the assault failed, it would not just mean dead hostages. It would mean the galaxy branding humanity as reckless butchers. When the order came to move, the men did so without hesitation. The Resolute detached a stealth shuttle and launched it across the black void. Inside, Maddox crouched at the front, visor lowered, rifle angled down. Hale sat hunched over a portable console, code flickering across his screen. Ward stood behind them both, silent, his presence grounding the tension with sheer force of will. They docked against an auxiliary hatch on the station's dark side, the metal clank of contact reverberating through the shuttle. Maddox was first out, weapon raised, scanning for threats. His squad followed, their movements soundless but sharp. Hale muttered as he worked his rig against the hatch's panel. Give me 60 seconds. Their lock codes are a joke. True to his word, the door hissed open, revealing a narrow maintenance shaft that stank of ozone and coolant. The men moved inside, weapons sweeping, the beam of helmet lights slicing through dust motes. Ward's voice was barely above a whisper. No alarms. Stay invisible until we strike. They advanced deeper, tension winding tighter with each step. The sounds of the Claw echoed faintly through the steel, guttural commands, the shuffle of boots, the occasional scream of a hostage being disciplined into silence. Maddox's grip tightened on his rifle. They're getting too comfortable. Ward answered, voice even. Then we make them uncomfortable. Hours of preparation condensed into moments of clarity. Hale split from the group, carrying his rig toward a relay station that pulsed with alien power. He knelt, eyes narrowing, hands moving in a blur. Jamming net's thick, but I'll carve through it. When I flip the switch, everything they've tried to hide becomes their downfall. Ward clasped his shoulder briefly before moving on with Maddox and the breach team. No words passed, but the weight of trust was there. The breach team reached their staging point, a thin wall separating them from one of the Claw's secondary patrol routes. Maddox raised 2 fingers, then a fist. The men froze, waiting for his signal. Beyond the wall, footsteps approached, claws scraping against steel. Ward's pulse slowed. He had been here before too many times. The difference was not the danger but the clarity of purpose. Terrorism was a plague. It thrived only when fear gave it breath. Tonight, humanity would deny it that oxygen. Maddox's fist dropped. The wall panel blew inward with a concussive crack, and the first Shydrek patrol fell before they could even raise their rifles. Suppressed shots whispered through the corridor, bodies collapsing in silence. The humans moved forward, relentless, efficient. From his post, Hale's voice whispered over comms. Feeds are shifting. Give it 30 seconds and the galaxy's going to see you in action instead of those lizards preening over corpses. Ward lowered his rifle barrel, his voice steady. Then let's show them. The squad pressed deeper into the station's veins, shadows swallowing them as they closed on the hostages' haul. For the first time since the siege began, the Claw were no longer hunters. They were prey, and humanity had come to collect the debt. The hostage chamber seethed with desperation. Hundreds of alien delegates huddled in terrified clusters under the cavernous dome, the floor lit by harsh overhead lamps that threw every flinch and sob into stark relief. The Shydrek Claw prowled among them with predatory swagger, pulse rifles gleaming in clawed hands. Their leader stood at the center, a towering brute with scarred scales and jagged teeth, his voice echoing across the hall. "You have seen our mercy. You have seen our wrath. One more hour and we will begin cleansing this station, blood by blood, until tribute is delivered." His words carried across every screen in the galaxy, a performance staged for maximum terror. Yet what the Claw didn't know was that their stage had already been stolen from them. Hidden in the station circuitry, Lieutenant Marcus Hale smirked as his code threaded through their network like a parasite. He muted the terrorists' feed with a few keystrokes, replacing it with raw footage of human soldiers moving like shadows through the station's veins. "They want fear," Hale murmured, his voice low but edged with satisfaction. "Let's give the galaxy something better, truth." In the narrow service corridors, Captain Elias Ward moved with Sergeant Cole Maddox at his side, the breach team flowing behind them in disciplined silence. The corpses of 2 Shydrek patrols lay cooling in the dark, their blood seeping into grates. Not a single alarm had been raised. Ward's hand signals carried more weight than words, each motion driving the squad forward with lethal precision. Maddox's breathing was steady, controlled, though his eyes gleamed with the anticipation of violence. "2 doors ahead," he whispered over comms. "That's the hall. Once we're in, no turning back." Ward gave a single nod. Fast and absolute. The charge detonated with a muted thump, the door folding inward like paper. The humans surged through, weapons snapping to bear. The Claw barely had time to react before the first shots cracked through the air, muffled by suppressors but carrying the unmistakable finality of death. Terrorists fell, their armored forms collapsing among the hostages they had been tormenting. Panic erupted, screams filling the chamber as civilians scrambled to the floor. Ward's voice cut through the chaos, steady and commanding. "Stay down. Stay still. We'll clear them out." Maddox was already moving like a predator unleashed. He drove forward, rifle bucking in controlled bursts, cutting down 2 Shydrek who rushed from the flanks. His voice rang over comms with grim satisfaction. "Targets falling. Push through." The Claw roared in fury, their leader bellowing commands as he rallied his warriors. Gunfire erupted in deafening volleys, bolts of searing plasma cutting through the air. The chamber transformed into a killing ground, civilians screaming as the firefight exploded around them. Ward advanced methodically, each shot precise, every movement calculated to shield the innocents behind him. His men mirrored his discipline, their lines tightening, their fire interlocking to deny the Claw any chance of regrouping. On the far side of the chamber, Hale's stolen feed went live. Across the galaxy, viewers who had been forced to watch executions now saw something entirely different. Humans storming into the fray, pulling civilians to safety even as they gunned down their captors with ruthless efficiency. The terror broadcast had become a war documentary in real time, every shot a sentence in humanity's doctrine. "Your show's been cancelled," Hale muttered, locking the feed. "Now it's ours." A Shydrek warrior grabbed a hostage and pressed a blade against their throat, screaming into the chaos. "Hold fire or this one dies." Maddox's rifle snapped up before Ward could even respond. One shot, clean through the alien's skull, dropped him before his threat could finish. The hostage collapsed, unhurt but shaking. Maddox didn't slow. He pressed forward, teeth bared in a grim smile. "We don't pause for theatrics." Ward caught his eye for the briefest moment, then gave the smallest of nods. Ruthlessness had its place, and tonight it was saving lives. The Claw leader realized too late what kind of enemy he faced. Humans didn't bargain, didn't stall, didn't hesitate. They advanced like a storm, every step driving him back toward the chamber's command dais. His guttural roar carried fury but also something new, uncertainty. The firefight stretched into brutal minutes, each second an eternity of noise and blood. Civilians cowered against the walls as humans cut down their captors one by one. The squad moved with terrifying unity. One man suppressing, another flanking, another pulling a hostage clear. No motion wasted, no bullet fired without purpose. And still the galaxy watched. Hale ensured every scream of the Shydrek, every act of human resolve, was broadcast without filter. In distant systems, governments stared in shock, some in horror, others in awe. Where the claw had wanted terror, humanity had delivered something far more dangerous: certainty. When the last of the claw patrols fell, silence crashed over the chamber, broken only by the whimpering of freed hostages. Ward stood at the center, rifle lowered but eyes hard, scanning for threats. "Status?" he asked. Maddox reloaded with a sharp click, blood spattering his armor. "Clear on this side." They fought like amateurs once the momentum broke. Hale's voice came through the comms, edged with grim humor. "Half the galaxy just saw you turn a hostage crisis into a recruitment poster for the human military. Congratulations, Captain." Ward didn't smile. He glanced at the cluster of civilians, their wide eyes reflecting both fear and gratitude. He knew the message was larger than these lives saved. It was about every future life threatened by terror. The moment of reprieve didn't last. A heavy blast door at the far end of the hall screeched open, revealing a wave of armored claw reinforcements. Their leader snarled, scarred muzzle twisted in fury, his voice booming. "You dare defile us with your defiance? You think you can kill us like cattle? We will burn this station down to ashes with every soul inside." Ward leveled his rifle, calm as stone. "Not while I draw breath." The battle reignited with brutal ferocity. Plasma bolts seared the walls, ricocheting among panicked civilians. Maddox dove forward, his squad following as they met the surge head-on. The air filled with smoke, sparks, and the acrid stench of charred metal. Hale's voice cut in again, urgent. "Captain, I've traced their backup signal. They've armed charges in the command center. If we don't take it, they'll level the station just to spite us." Ward's eyes narrowed. He fired into the mob, dropping another claw, then keyed his comm. "Understood. We'll finish this here, then we move. No delays." The firefight pushed to a fever pitch. Maddox slammed into a claw warrior, driving his combat knife up under the alien's chin with a grunt of exertion. He wrenched it free and kept moving, his voice ragged but exultant. "They break like anyone else once you hit them hard enough." Ward cut down another, his every motion efficient, precise, as though his body remembered the rhythm of battle even before his mind commanded it. Around him, the squad pressed relentlessly, the line of claw crumbling beneath human ferocity. When the last reinforcements fell, the chamber fell silent again, but this time the silence carried a new weight. The hostages stared at their rescuers, eyes wide not only with relief but with something sharper: fear. Ward lowered his rifle, his expression unreadable. He turned toward his men, speaking low. "We move to the command center. If they think we'll let them destroy this place, they're mistaken." Maddox wiped blood from his knife onto his armor and nodded. "Time to cut the head off the snake." Hale's feet continued streaming across the galaxy. Billions watched as humans regrouped, their boots pounding against steel as they advanced deeper into enemy territory. The final confrontation loomed, and with it, the message that had begun in whispers would soon be carved into the bones of every terrorist across the stars. Ward spoke one last line before leading his men forward, his voice calm, implacable, and carried on the comms for the galaxy to hear. "We don't negotiate. We end threats. And the Shydrek are finished." The squad moved into the shadows once more, leaving behind the freed but trembling hostages, and the galaxy leaned closer to its screens, waiting to see what kind of species made such promises without hesitation. The corridors leading to the command center stank of smoke and ozone, the walls scorched where plasma fire had raked them during the fighting. Captain Elias Ward led the way, rifle steady, every line of his posture carved with resolve. Behind him, Sergeant Cole Maddox moved with restless energy, his armor scarred from close combat, blade still streaked with alien blood. Lieutenant Marcus Hale followed at the rear, portable rig slung over his shoulder, his expression taut as he monitored enemy signals. "They know we're coming," Hale murmured. "Every claw left alive is rallying around their leader. And they've armed enough charges in that command room to vaporize half the station." Ward didn't break stride. "Then we don't give them time to trigger them." The team advanced, boots ringing against steel, hostages' muffled sobs fading behind them as they pushed deeper into the heart of the crisis. Every step carried the weight of humanity's doctrine, the iron refusal to compromise. They reached the final blast doors, massive slabs of alloy sealed tight. Maddox pressed his palm to the surface, feeling the faint tremor of power humming on the other side. "Whole nest is waiting. This is it." Ward studied the door for a long moment, then turned to Hale. "How long to override?" Hale connected a cable, fingers moving across his console with speed. 5 minutes, maybe less. Assuming they didn't hardwire the controls. "You've got 3. Hale smirked without humor. "Of course I do. While he worked, Maddox checked the squad's gear one last time. His voice was low, steady, carrying the edge of a soldier who had already accepted the cost. No half measures. We clear them out, every last one. If they think we'll hesitate, they're dead wrong. Ward met his gaze. There's no room for hesitation here. A shudder ran through the floor as the station systems groaned. Hale hissed a curse. They're trying to trigger the detonators. I'm holding them off, but it's like plugging leaks in a dam. Ward's hand settled on his shoulder, grounding him. Just keep the water back until we break it. The blast doors groaned, sparks dancing across their seams as Hale forced the locks. With a final hiss of hydraulics, the slabs parted, revealing the claw's inner sanctum. The chamber was vast, lined with control stations glowing with alien glyphs. At its center stood the claw leader, taller than the rest, scales blackened with ritual scars, his eyes burning with fury. Around him, a dozen heavily armed warriors bristled, weapons raised, their growls echoing in the chamber like drums of war. At their feet, the detonator console pulsed with warning lights, a single command away from annihilation. The leader spread his arms wide, his voice booming. You fools! You think your savagery frightens us? We are death incarnate. You will die here, and your kind will be remembered only as ashes. Ward stepped into the chamber, rifle level, voice steady as granite. No. Will be remembered as the end of you. The firefight erupted in an instant. Plasma bolts and gunfire clashed in a storm of light and thunder. The squad fanned out, moving with lethal precision. Maddox charged forward, firing in short, savage bursts, his rifle barking as claw fell one after another. He closed the distance with a roar, blade flashing as he buried it in the chest of a warrior who lunged for him. Blood sprayed across his visor, but he pressed on without pause. Ward advanced methodically, his shots clean, every squeeze of the trigger a measured end. He moved toward the leader, ignoring the chaos at the edges. His path was carved by discipline, not rage, but his intent was no less final. Hale ducked behind a console, fingers flying across his rig as he battled the detonator system. They've hardwired redundancies, I can stall it, but I can't kill it. Someone's got to take the controls physically. Ward's eyes locked on the command dais where the leader stood, clawed hand hovering near the console. Then we cut him down. The leader roared, hurling himself into the fray with brutal speed. His claws tore through metal as he lunged at Ward. The impact rattled the floor as Ward was forced back, his rifle knocked aside. The alien's jaws snapped inches from his face, hot breath washing over him. Maddox broke free from his own melee, charging across the floor with a snarl. He slammed into the claw leader's side, knife flashing as he drove it between armored scales. The beast roared in pain, hurling Maddox across the room with terrifying strength. He crashed into a console, armor sparking, but he dragged himself upright, blood running from his mouth. Ward drew his combat knife, the steel glinting in the chamber's harsh light. No more hostages. No more executions. This ends with you. The leader lunged again, claws slashing. Ward ducked, driving his blade upward into exposed flesh, then twisted with all his strength. The alien howled, thrashing, but Ward held fast, his voice a low growl. We don't negotiate. With a final wrench, he drove the blade deep into the creature's throat. The leader staggered, choking on his own blood, then collapsed at Ward's feet. The chamber fell into sudden silence, the remaining claw frozen, their morale shattered. Maddox staggered forward, wiping blood from his face, and fired a single round into the console. Sparks erupted, the detonator controls shattering under the impact. Ward straightened, pulling his blade free, his face unreadable. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of his men. Clear them out. The order was carried out with ruthless efficiency. The last of the claw were cut down, their bodies strewn across the chamber floor. Smoke hung thick in the air, acrid and bitter, carrying the stench of finality. Hale rose from behind the console, his rig still linked. He glanced at Ward, expression unreadable. The galaxy's been watching the whole time. Every second of this. You want me to cut the feed? Ward shook his head slowly. He turned toward the nearest functioning camera, blood still dripping from his blade. His voice was calm, measured, but it carried the weight of a verdict. To anyone who thinks terror is a weapon, hear me. Humanity doesn't bargain. We don't cower. If you take hostages, if you slaughter innocents, if you raise fear as your banner, we will not meet you at a table. We will hunt you. We will end you. This is your warning. Remember it. Billions across the galaxy heard those words as they echoed through every channel, every system. Some stared in horror, others in awe, but none could deny the message. Humanity had drawn a line no one else dared to mark. The chamber went quiet as Ward lowered his knife, sliding it back into its sheath. Maddox limped forward, wiping grime from his visor, his grin ragged but fierce. Guess they know now. Hale gave a low whistle, shaking his head. All they know. Question is, do they believe it? Ward's eyes hardened. They will. The squad gathered themselves, silent but resolute, stepping over the bodies of their enemies as they left the chamber. Behind them, the monitors still flickered with Ward's warning, replaying across the galaxy like a mantra. For the first time, terrorists across the stars hesitated, their certainty shaken. Ward led his men back into the corridors, his shadow long against the steel walls. The hostages would be safe. The station would endure. But the galaxy had changed forever. Humanity had spoken, and the echo of that declaration would ripple outward, shaping every choice, every conflict to come. The night had ended not with negotiation, but with a promise carved in blood: humanity would never bow.